Now, designer mode has some different starting platforms. This is my starting platform, which anyone can download also if you want it. But what you basically want to do when you're getting to designer like this is you click escape and you just destroy all vehicles. So you get a clean slate. Then you can click escape again, you can move around and you have your character here. And you may be noticing that you're falling down. So if you click tab, you can be inside your character. If you click tab again, you can move outside it. If you don't want to fall with your character falling down like this, click E and then click E again, and you are having a free cam that's unbound to your character. To build a vehicle, look somewhere in the water/air and click the B key. To not let your block fall down and plop down in the water like this, you can click caps lock. You will make sure it's locked in the air. In this game, there are different building modes. So if you have the key-based system, you can move around by just placing or removing blocks even. And the mouse is just giving you the direction you are looking at. You'll just move around with WASD like this, space, and Alt to go down. You can double tap any key to go fast. It is directional dependent on where you're looking. So I'm just holding W here, right? Then there is the other building mode that is mouse-based. You'll just click F3 to switch to this. It has a much similar building way to many other games. Now, please learn the key-based system. The mouse-based system is so much inferior and the key-based system is just so good for this game. You may be unused to the controls at first, but it's much better. To stop building on your boat, click the B key, it falls down. Look at it again, click B again, you can lock it with caps. Now, to all of the blocks. We have so many blocks here, and to cut things a little bit short, wood and alloy are the floaty blocks. So when you're building boats, you want to have it out of alloy and wood to a big part, and then you can have some metal on it too without it sinking. If we just check here, the water area is where all of the different water based blocks are. So here we have your water propellers, sails, rudders, hydrofoils. Here we have a bunch of different types of weapon systems, and we're going to choose one of them. We have dedicated tutorials for that, of course. We have defense. We're not going to go into that much this time. It's not that important here. Sub-objects we will return to a little bit. And down here we have new blueprints. So if you don't want to build a hull for your first ship, you can just take any pre-made hull. And you see this little arrow here? It needs to face forwards towards the front text, otherwise you'll have trouble. And you'll just plonk this down here. And you can actually remove that portion. So now this is your boat. But I want to build my own hull here, so I'm gonna start on a new little project. We're gonna do things very simply here. So we will select a wooden beam like this. We're gonna remove this 1 meter block. It's generally better to use larger blocks, as large as you can, because they have a health point bonus. Now this is the front of the ship, important as said. Watch towards the front and click the N key. Then you will have a mirror. This mirror plane will of course shorten down building time a lot. Now we're going to make a little medium boat here. Like that, and you can see we left some spaces here. Place the block straight like this, watch downwards and click F. This area is now filled. Wood is floaty as said, it has buoyancy. Metal is not, but metal is much better at protecting us. So we will have a line of metal around this boat to protect us from incoming fire. And when you're selecting blocks here, you want to move them around and do different directions. You select a block like this, and then you will hold the tab, you get all these circles, and they will tell you how to turn the block dependent on how you're looking. So that's correct. So we can do like that, do like that. And here you can see we need to join these corners here. So we need to use another slope here. And now you can see we can't place this block in the air, but if we click backspace, we suddenly can. Now you can see if this is being hit by anything, it would just fall off. So this is just a temporary allowance. but when we plonked it down there, you can see it now works. As said, we can use these of course, but it's better to use larger blocks if we can. So we're switching to the beam slope here, turning it around like this, and trying to make a smooth shape of this ship. From the depth is subject to the laws of hydrodynamics. From the depth they are kind of weak, but they still do work. So make sure that your builds are pointy and sharp if you want them to be fast. Now you should probably check if your boat even floats. And we have a lot of wood and not that much metal, so we have no trouble floating at all. If you have trouble floating, you can always use an air pump. Just place it in there and it will suddenly be very floaty. However, beware that the air pumps, especially on larger ships, does cause a lot of lag, so for larger ships they are never used, or should be used. If you want to be more floaty in a less laggy way, what you can do is just adding some alloy instead. Alloy and wood, as said, are the floaty blocks. You can see Block's armor class, it's 40 and it's 47 here, and that is because it's boosted by the blocks behind of it. So it's usually a good idea to have 2 layers. Having more than 2 layers won't give you additional bonuses though, but that is a general recommendation. If you're confused about words, please watch my dictionary video that goes through all of the useful words that you'll need to know in From the Depth. Now, you may be pretty happy with the shape of your boat and you may not want to lose it. Click the escape button and save vehicle. You can name it whatever you want and save new vehicle as vehicle. Then you can load it from here whenever you need it. If you need to save it again, you'll just save and save over. In From the Depth, there are some different things we need to understand. We need something called engine power and we need something called materials. So if we go into resources, we have material storage, and that is what is material. That's what we need to care about right now. So they have different shapes and forms, they are all the same. Just choose whatever container you like to look at. Now we have 16,000 materials and you can fill them up pressing the Q button in designer mode. Now we need some type of engine power, otherwise we can't move around. To have that, we will select the fuel engines. Now I have a really good tutorial about everything you need to know about fuel engines and how to make them as best as you can. But for this little thing, we're just going to select one of these pre-made fuel engines and we're gonna put it in the back here. I really recommend that tutorial though. Now, fuel engines, they need fuel. So we'll go into the resources tab and select the fuel. If you look at the fuel here, you can see 500 mats extractable as fuel per minute. We estimate you require a maximum of 2.5. So yeah, we'll need a couple of more of these, right? Now we have some engine power, so we can add our basic propulsion. If you click the middle mouse button, you get to this beautiful little menu, and here, if you right-click this, you'll get a mirror mode in the center. Very handy. Here I just added these hydrodynamically, so they don't cause more drag than they need to. And we'll go to water tab, and we're gonna have huge propellers, 2 of them like that. They will need to go to side, so we're going to add a rudder to this boat, turning it around like that, and that. If your rudder is reversed, you can reverse the input inside of here, like this, if that is a problem you'll have. We need to control this boat a little bit here, so we're going to start with some manual control. We have a share. The articulated share lets you not move around very much, which makes it more stable. And then we have a ship's wheel. For a vehicle controller, everything is fine. So how do we use this boat? Well, if you hold you will move around like that, and the boat is now going away. If you want to lock onto the boat with your camera, you can use shift and caps lock to lock on. You can otherwise just be in build mode and you will be on the craft, or you can click tab and be inside of your character, click tab again and move around. It's only when you double click E that you will be detached. So our boat is now moving, isn't that quite nice? Let's use the maximum speed. You can see the main drive in the lower right corner. we are having a good speed of 30 meters per second. H key, you can see we can turn as well. Very nice. If you want to stop the boat, click U and J at the same time and you will have no drive. And you don't have to use rudders if you want to turn and move around. You can actually use propellers as well. So I just add this here and we go to water and we're gonna select the small propeller. If you want to have this thing aim the direction you're looking at, you're just clicking the G key and it will aim the direction you are looking at, like that. Very nice. If you want to select the block you're hovering over, you can click R key and you can get that block. Anyways, you can't block propellers outputs because then you can see not enough free room behind. So here you can see this little propeller. If you go into it, it's set to automatic control. Now, if you leave everything at automatic control, it usually just works. But personally, I think automatic control messes things up a lot of the time. So I will select manual control, and I actually want to turn off automatic control for all propulsion. So then we need to set up everything manually. So if we click Turner preset there, and Turner preset there, and see, yeah, they're all Turner presets, and they're green. That means that they are the right way around. So if I do like this, you can see we are now turning sideways like that. And if I go back here, I'll need to make sure they are set to pusher preset and pusher preset. That means they will respond to the command they were before. That means that they are working as propulsion. Sometimes the pre-selection for the manual control is wrong and it may think it's a pitcher or a roller or something like that. Now, for many boats, you probably want to have a manual control sometimes and an automatic control at other times. To have that ability, we'll need to add something that gives us a stabilization for manual control and automatic control, and that is PID general purpose. We're gonna have two of them. Inside of it, we will set propulsion pitch, check this box, and input signal will be pitch. The other one will be propulsion roll, and the input will be roll. And we can leave them as is for now. Now what we need to do is to add some stabilization. And we're gonna have some circular propellers here and here, and these are set to pitcher presets, which is nice. And we're going to have here and there, and they are pitcher and they are pitcher. Then we're going to go to around the middle of the boat where we expect the center of mass to be later. Now the center of mass is a little bit to the right, but it's not going to be after some time. And now we need to check roller preset and roller preset. And the same on this side, roller preset and roller preset. Right, so when we put this boat down into the water, they will already start working and make sure that we are stable and nice. So what you can do is basically go around here and the propellers will actually try and keep the boat level. If the effect of the stabilization is a little bit too weak, you can go in here and you can increase the gain to something more appropriate. Test around with different values and see what works the best. Then you should have a stabilized control, so you can go left and right and move about with your boat and still being pretty stable. Now this is done easily with the AI as well. Problem is when you do it with the AI only, when the AI is not controlling the ship, it's also not going to stabilize it. That's the problem. That's why we need to add these. About that, it's time to add the AI. And the AI we can find on the AI tab, and we're going to select a little preset here. So we're just gonna select the medium little preset, place it down here. Now this is a wireless transmitter to other block. This is the main frame. And here we have aim point selection cards and AI routine cards. Now it's not set up yet, so we can move around and add some cool stuff here. And here on the aim point selection card, you can see we have some different values. This ship is going to target the thing with the most firepower as for now. And here we can make it target, for example, blocks above water. Maybe our weapons aren't very well designed to shoot at underwater. Different settings there. Anyways, we go into the AI or click the C menu and click on the AI here. So we're gonna add a behavior here. A lot of ships use broadside 2.0. Some are pointing at, and very many ships are using circle at distance. So we're gonna set our combat distance here when it's gonna engage in combat. And here you can see the max roll to target. This should be 0 if we want to be a stable ship. And we should ignore altitude, because circle at distance can be used for aircraft as well, of course. Under adjustments, we are setting this as on water. We're gonna make sure it doesn't collide with anything by leaving the settings as is. And this vehicle is a sea vehicle. It probably needs at least 19 meters or whatever of depth, otherwise it will not work. And if you set that to 0, it might run into the ground and destroy itself. Turning circle, probably a little more, I don't know, 160 meters sounds about nice. Right, now we can go to maneuver. We're gonna add a maneuver. This is a ship or tank. Under here, we should use pitch controls and set the idle pitch angle to 0. And if we want to change the AI PIDs, we can do it here, but the general PIDs we already added are actually overriding these values, but they kind of look the same in the setup. And you can name the AI. This is, for example, Montrose 3rd Class your name, because maybe you are joining the army of GMODIST by self-assigning that role in the Discord. Well, then you can. Here we have it. Now, when we are not controlling this ship, we can see that the AI has already taken over control. We can then take over the ship and use it whenever we want to, and the AI is going to take over as soon as we let go of our controls. Even if we have an AI, our AI is basically incapable of doing much because it can't detect the enemy. So, to detect the enemy, we are going to add some type of detection systems. We're just gonna do a little simple tower where we're gonna have some AI connectors, and these are just connective pieces. Under that, we're gonna have a wireless receiver. This will be connected up automatically to this thing, the wireless transmitter. So we can have a piece of AI up here as well. Now, there are so different type of detection components you can use, but the most important thing you definitely want is the laser rangefinder and a 360-degree camera. That's the most important one. To get some extra accuracy, it can be a good idea to have a camera or tele gimbal tracker. Then we're gonna do this little weird thing here where we actually build up like this, and on top of it we can add a radar. And you might think, doesn't the radar, we're gonna have the 360 radar, doesn't the radar block the view of the camera? No, because the camera is looking in this direction exactly and this direction exactly. Yeah, and even if this is here, it's not actually blocking any of the view. I know, it's weird, it's just how it works. So now we have some decent detection. Different detection components are using different amount of general processing power. Please refer to my dictionary video. But in any case, to cut things short, these use GPPP, and if you have too little GPPP, the detection will be very inefficient, and to get more GPPP, you'll add general processing cards. They're expensive. Now we have a cool looking boat, but we obviously need some kind of firepower, right? And we're going to go to simple weapons. Here we get some basic firepower. The Age of Sail cannons together with a laser and a short cannon. These AA guns and the 40mm ones here, and the 30 and the 60mm cannon, they're really simple, you don't need to configure anything. So we can just add one of these in the back as some type of extra AA cannon. Now, to make this even work, we need to have something called a local weapon controller. To make your life easy, just select the all-in-one local weapon controller. If you go into this, you can select that, for example, have some limitations. This is not going to be able to shoot at things underwater, so we might set it to not target that. And it's probably not going to reach more than like 2000 meters or whatever, so we can set it at that. Other than that, this is absolutely fine and should be working. We now have a working gun. And if I walk to this gun, I can actually control it. And shooting it by holding control. However, to use guns, we need something called ammunition. If you don't have ammunition, the ammunition tab is going to go down and you are going to not be able to fire for a while. So you'll just add some ammunition here. You can see that our weapons require 19 and we now have 1200. But we're gonna add some more weapons so they can be here for the time of being. Do know that these are pretty explosive. If they got damaged, they will blow up pretty spectacularly, so don't put them too close to anything that's very important. About that, our boat was a little bit destroyed here. If you want your boat to repair itself, go down to miscellaneous and select repair bot. You can add a couple of repair bots here. Don't have too many, but maybe 2 or 3 is an appropriate amount. And if we destroy something here, you can see that the repair bots, they come flying and they will repair the damaged. Also, your character is equipped with repair tentacles. To be able to manually control guns without walking up to them and controlling them because they are near, go to control and select a fire control computer and just have it close by to the bridge. And when you have that, you can control all the guns. To make a little bit of a more fancy cannon, we go down to sub-objects and we select a 1-axis turret here. We can plonk it down here, and this is a different object. So when we're building on this, we can't build on the floor here. So if we want to build on this, we click B and click B again. And if we want to build on this, we look at it, click B, and we can build on it. On this thing, we can also place an all-in-one local weapon controller, and then we can have some weapon systems. Onto this thing, we can even use some prefabs. Now I'm going to use my prefabs here. All the commissioned officers in the army of GMODIST have access to all of my prefabs and whatever if they want to use them. A lot of them are of course uploaded on the Steam workshop, where you can get many of them as well. Anyways, I'm just going to add a quick little cram cannon here. It's kind of not what this video is exactly about, but we'll need something here. Now you can see we ran out of materials because it's tried to reload. We can make sure, yeah, we have enough ammo. Good. Protecting your turrets with some armor is of course a smart idea. And there we have that. And we're gonna add some missiles to complement. So we have a fly swatter interceptor array. We can use this little prefab, and this is going to add some interceptor missiles, which is going to target incoming missiles and cram shells and hopefully shoot them down. We're also going to add some extra cluster VLS missiles, because why not? Right, so I think we have a pretty solid setup here. This boat has everything it needs to have, which means we of course need to finish up this armor a little bit. And we can fill here and fill there. Protect them here. Add some nice wind protecting glass, very important. So you may see that we have been a little bit careful at covering up this, and that is because you can go down here. This is a D11 turret. This is kind of the pattern where the turret will be blocked or not, where the alloy represents the turret and the metal represents the hull of the ship. So we'll need to leave that space to not make it collide. Basically like this and like that. That's as tight as we can do it. We of course need to add the glorious flag of the army of GMODIST, which is flag post. I have some other videos showing you how to get your own flags in from the depth. Here we go, very nice. You can also select the color here, and when you're building, you can even build with your fleet colors. This is what I usually do, but if you want to, you can also color this afterwards. So for example, I can paint it like this. If you want to test your ship, you can click the X menu, and it's a tradition that we always test everything against the Marauder. And the missiles are getting there. This is so funny. And there, isn't that quite beautiful? All right, look at that. Oh, that was totally over-penetrating. Well, enjoy your first ship. Your ship should be absolutely functional. And if you're not happy with what the AI is doing, you can always take over the control yourself. Ram! Army of GMODIST, Invictus. Victory is ours! Yeah, so enjoy and do whatever you want with this. This is Eric and we're back with instant tutorials. It's time to talk about armor again. So, if we're building here
on this little structure, we can go into blocks. And armor is of course blocks we use to protect our crafts from incoming damage. To put it simply, armor is a combination of health and armor class. If you look at this wood block, a square meter of wood has 200 health points and 8 armor. So the armor on the block here, the 8 armor, is called armor class. For weapons, they usually have a AP value, and if the AP value is higher than the AC value or equal to it, it will deal full damage. But if the AP value is lower than the AC value, it will not deal full damage. We're gonna go into that a little bit more in detail. If we look at heavy armor, it has armor 60. Well, that means it's a lot better to protect you against armor penetrating shells than wood. It also has a lot more health. But if, for example, we have a shot that has more than 60 armor points in dealing its damage, well, at that point, our 60 armor won't really help at all. So if the armor doesn't help, it's actually more cost effective to have wood as armor. Because this wood blocks costs 1 material, and this heavy armor blocks costs 25 materials. If you're anything like me, considering you're watching this video, you probably need a visual representation to understand this. Let's move over to this weapon platform. When we are making armor, it is important that the armor is as cheap as possible and as effective as possible. So that means that using heavy armor is usually not the best idea. This little slab of heavy armor costs as much as these 5 meter of metal, the most common armor. And that costs as much as these 25 meter of wood. And the funny thing is that health points per materials, wood is the best one of them all, absolutely the best one. But they have some drawbacks, of course. That's why people don't use it that much. So to understand armor, we will first need to demonstrate this. This is a gun testing station, of course, and we're going to check the APS here. If we scroll down here, we can see this is a pure sabot head. Now, we won't go into that in this video, but sabot heads and pure sabot shells is of course the most armor penetrating shell. You can see that the expected armor pierce, the AP value, is 107. That means that the benefits of having heavy armor is absolutely useless. And wood should perform much better under these circumstances, since we only need cheap health points. We're going to shoot a 150mm shot against these armor targets to test our thesis. The expected kinetic damage is 7000. So let's check that out. First, against the wood, in the upper right corner, you can see the damage dealt, which was 6000. So let's shoot against the metal slab. 6000 again. And finally, against the heavy armor. Here you can see that the heavy armor was the only armor that was penetrated during this test. You can clearly see here from this example that in this case, the wood did the absolute best. More than half of the metal armor was penetrated, but not even a third of the wooden armor was penetrated. And the heavy armor, well, it's breached. So now we're switching to a heavy head for comparison. The AP, armor piercing value, is lower. It's at 28 instead now. However, the kinetic damage is a lot higher. So let's check that out. And for a quick little reminder, wood's armor class is 8, metal's armor class is 40, and heavy armor's armor class is 60. Wood, 14,000 damage. Didn't get through though. Metal, 7,000 damage. Also didn't get through. So lastly, heavy armor, 5,000 damage. Didn't even get through. From that, we can conclude that when the enemy is using weapons that are really deeply armor penetrating, you will need to use blocks, a lot of blocks, that have the most health points per material. The best one is wood, the second best one is stone. But when the weapons don't have a very high AP value, well, then you can really get protected using armor. High armor. While wood may be technically best for a lot of scenarios, you can see that having 25 meters of wood is really thick. So you might understand that it's not really practical to do so. So that is something you should keep in mind when choosing armor. Do you have the space for it? If you have the space for it, you don't need to choose the most dense armor. But for things that has to be dense, like turret heads and turret necks and stuff like that, well, heavy armor is the obvious choice. Now we're getting back here to check some other armor basics. So, you may notice that a lot of From the Depth builders try to prefer to use the 4-meter beams as much as possible. And that's no coincidence. It's not only because it's easier to build that way, it is also a very simple fact. You see this block? It has 350 health. So, the block that's twice as large should have exactly 700 health. It does not. It has 770 health. And at the bottom there, you can see extra health from being bigger. So, the game rewards us for using bigger blocks, because if we have too many blocks, the game will lag so much. If you're building a ship that has more than 100,000 blocks, it will usually lag too much for most people to have like 2 of these ships facing each other. So the 4-meter blocks, the largest block, is a 20% health bonus. And that's huge. So you really want to try and use the biggest blocks that you can. 4-meter, this one, 20% bonus. Now, this is a little fun secret I realized in a Gimli battle recently. This block, the 4-meter offset, it has a 5-meter length, so it gets 25% bonus. Yeah. There is another fun thing you can do too to add some armor. If you go into air and go into ducts, there are some really large ducts here. And these ducts, well, they are so large, so they are a little bit sheety in a way, so you don't get that bonus, of course. But having a heavy armor duct like this, it weighs a lot, it does, but it will give you a health of 37,500. That's a lot. So you can see that these ducts actually come with a little premium cost. If you see this heavy armor duct 3x3, it has a material cost of 350. And if you look at this 3-meter beam and take this times 3, well, you're not getting to 350 at all. That is because the game don't want us to only use the ducts because stuff looks funny. However, if you need to create a sheet that is protecting something from incoming damage, like if you have a front-sider and, for example, you're facing an army of GMODIST vessel equipped with the Arcoballista Invictus, as you probably have seen in the Game of the Battles, well, then it can be a good idea to have a sheet of super high health ducts like this, and that will protect you from being penetrated by the most heavy APS penetrators. Let's go through some armor basics. So, if you go into your Zeet menu, as in zebra, you will see the Health and AC tool. Drag this down to your toolbar. If you choose this tool, you will get some stats when you're looking at different blocks. You will see their armor class, as we went through before, and their health. Armor is essentially whatever protects your system blocks. They are mostly found in the blocks menu. Lead is one of the worst blocks for armor, of course. It's very heavy as heavy armor. It's pretty cheap, but it doesn't give you enough health points and armor for that cost. In that case, stone is better. Wood is, as previously mentioned, the most amount of health points for your materials, and in some sense the best kinetic defense armor. However, since your structure becomes very big, if you want to use it, Stone is usually a better choice for this, because it is as heavy as metal. As you can see here, at least at this update of the game, it might change. As always, check your numbers yourself. But it has a much higher armor class than wood. Now, armor class doesn't only matter when we're talking about kinetic. No, we have some other stats to keep in mind too. When we're dealing with explosions, when we're receiving explosive damage, having armor is really good. And then, when someone is using fragmentation damage against you, like for example crams with frag pellets. Each of these frag pellets, as of now at least, have only 4 in AP value. That means that even wood provides some defense against fragmentations, and of course, stone a lot more. So both when we're talking kinetics and when we're talking explosions, well, armor class matters. Like armor class, we have something that was added with the fire update. We have fire resistance. Wood's fire resistance is 10. I think the default flamer's value is 20, so it's way above that resistance. However, stone's fire resistance is 50. So that gives some pretty good protection. Stone is the best block to protect against fire, for example. Alloy also has 50 fire resistance, which is nice, but it also has a 25% flammability. That means when a fire destroys this block, it will add fuel to the fire. Metal has a lower fire resistance, but no flammability, which makes it a good protection against fire as well. Heavy armor has a very high fire resistance, but it also has a big flammability. That means that because they are so dense, they can contribute a little bit to the fire, but they're pretty resistant too. Rubber is the most flammable block at 100% flammability. Wood is close behind at 80. So that's also a stat to keep in mind when we're choosing the armor. Armor that is below water will of course be much better protected against fire. Moving on, we have alloy, which has an armor class of 35. However, the alloy block is very light. You can see its relative buoyancy is plus 32, which is a lot more floaty than even wood, which is weird. But it has a weight of 5, so it has half the weight of even wood, which is the next most light block. Stone and metal is at the same weight, and heavy armor and lead is at the same weight. Be careful with that heavy armor, your thing might become very heavy. Metal, the most useful armor block altogether, has 40 armor class, which is a good bit more than alloy, but they have the same cost. So using metal, if you can take the weight, is always better. Heavy armor has an armor class of 60, which is of course amazing, but the cost makes it so that you should use it very carefully. The only block that has some decent armor class that's not super expensive is the applique panels. Applique panels are pretty volatile, they only have 125 health. That is about half the health of a wood block. However, they have 50 in armor class, which means that they provide a decent defense against fragmentation, heat fragmentations, hash fragmentations, and explosions in some sense too. Applique panels is pretty shallow too, so it can be a great thing to add to things that need to have a lower profile, like aircraft or whatnot. Metal and alloy plate should be more seen as decorations. Of course, they provide some bit of protection, just like applique panels, due to them having a decent armor class. But they have so little health that people usually say that they will fly off when you sneeze on them. Now we come to a little interesting aspect. Most armor blocks can be stacked. You can see here that the armor class of this is now 48. But you know from before that the metal block's armor class is actually 40. It adds armor because it's structurally sound. Adds armor to other structural blocks, it says. So if we add another one, it's not changed. Only 1 meter behind it boosts the armor in front of it. That means that we can take a really strong block and back wood with. So if we look at heavy armor backed wood, we have an armor class of 20, which is of course a lot more than wood, since wood usually only has 8. So if you want to have pretty strong wood, well, you can back it up with heavy armor and you have some pretty sturdy wood there. Honorable mention is, of course, reinforced wood. It's basically a weird mix between wood and metal, but honestly, it's really terrible in every sense, and it's only if you can't have the space of having one layer of metal under one layer of wood that you would use reinforced decking. Reinforced decking is, of course, a nice decoration block that's a little bit more sturdy than wood. Now, alloy plates, plate panels, and era don't really add to the armor behind it. So they can be added as an extra layer, of course, but they won't boost anything. Era armor is explosive reactor armor. If you shoot this, it explodes, but it can instantly delete heat and HESH shells, which otherwise can be very scary. Now we need to talk a little bit about angle. The angle a projectile comes at the surface matters too. Here we have a very simple 52mm armed with a heavy head. Let's shoot this slope. 26. Because it comes at an angle, the damage dealt is less. If we instead turn this block around and shoot it again, it deals 86. So when things come into a slope, they deal less damage. You remember the AC versus the AP value. If we're having an AC value that's a lot higher than the armor piercing value, well, then we get an interesting phenomena. Watch this board behind. You can see, it bounces. Sometimes it will bounce, and sometimes it will be absorbed into that slab. However, those times when the shot is absorbed, like now, it deals minuscule amounts of damage, because this AP value is so much lower than this armor class. So that you can make it ricochet off surfaces and thus dealing so little damage. Another little point we will cover briefly is fire resistance. So we're gonna start some example fires. We can see here that the fuel is of course being decreased when the stone is burning up, but of course the stone doesn't add anything to the fuel. The fuel on the metal is also not being added any, so you can see here on the alloy it has more fuel left. Here on the wood it actually almost has as much fuel as when it started. Now you can see that while it hasn't destroyed the first heavy armor block yet, it's pretty interesting because you can see that the intensity actually decreases or increases dependent on what block it's burning down. And here, one block got destroyed, but fortunately for the fire, it just escaped adding that fuel to the fire. In any case, looking at this, you might think that heavy armor is a fantastic fire defense. And do you remember that heavy armor is pretty expensive though? So if we compare that to metal or stone, which is even cheaper than metal, metal and stone is actually the fire resistance champions, not heavy armor. Now, what's the most effective defense against fire? Well, that's an air gap. Fire won't jump distances in the air. For some reason, I don't know, it's just how it works. Now what we need to cover is a little bit about EMP defense. So when we look at different blocks, we can see that this local weapon controller, for example, has an EMP susceptibility of 100. Here we have a surge protector. They can be placed down to absorb surges from EMPs. This has also a 100% EMP susceptibility, and that basically means it can be hurt by EMP. Example of these are AIs, weapon controllers, laser systems, and many others. EMP is really scary because it tries to deal the most amount of damage it can deal with the path of least resistance. Some bit different blocks lead EMP surges a lot better than others. Like wood and stone are decent insulators, and metal is a very bad insulator. It just leads them away. As well as heavy armor, it just leads them very easily. Rubber is the only block that provides proper EMP insulation. So rubber, you need to insulate important parts. Here we have a couple of weapon controllers. And here we have a couple of insulated weapon controllers. If we put an EMP surge here, you can see it goes and attacks this block, which now has been damaged to about 50% of its original health. An EMP can be a little bit weird to understand. If we have a smaller jolt, like 17,000 EMP damage, you can see it goes to destroy these blocks on the side. Now these are insulated, and EMP wants to choose the least part of resistance, but because there is nothing other, it will jump that rubber insulation anyways. So it's important to have some EMP surge protector as well. But the weird thing is, if we have a really big EMP surge, it will actually just bypass these and go down into the main structure, because there is some other blocks inside of here, like these surge protectors built into the structure, that of course have a lot more health points to hit for. So it's kind of weird. EMP is kind of conscious. The smaller charges try to go for smaller targets, and the big charges try to go for the biggest targets. That's something to keep in mind. When you're building your system, you always want to have surge protectors on some strategic places. Like if we just have a tiny little surge protector here, so if you have a pretty big EMP blast here, and we send it going, it will actually go for this tiny little surge protector. And the funny thing is, when EMP has gone away, it can't go back. So you'll need to think on how you can isolate it in a point and make it absorb at that spot. We have some tutorials that go through EMP more carefully though. Now let's look at some practical armoring examples if we were making this little boat here. So most boat hulls are built out of metal or alloy. This one is built out of metal. Only when you need a really fast thing, you can of course having alloy as well on the outside instead. But generally, metal is very awesome. So for the outer layer of your armor, you usually want 2 layers. You can have 2 layers of metal if you want to have a sturdy construction that can take a lot of beating. If you, however, are looking to get a little bit of a better weight and more floatiness, you can instead back it up with alloy, like this. Then we get a nice passive float. If you instead want to back up your armor, but you need to save some costs, you can always back it up with stone instead, and you get a little bit of a cheaper option. Now, if you need to protect yourself against most different types of damage, you have your plasma, you have your hash, you have your heat, and other type of shape charges. Well, you need to have an air gap. And for plasma, and also fire, you need a proper air gap, not like a fake air gap. Some people like to have some spall catchers, they're called. So when heat is coming in, you want them to catch that spall, and thus you can have beam slopes is the most and best used thing for this. But if you want to protect yourself against plasma too, you'll need to leave this space in between. So we have a free space. The best spall catcher there is actually the beam slope of heavy armor. It is a little bit expensive, of course, but this thing can take hash and heat beatings all day. And the best thing to back it up with is, of course, a full block of heavy armor. Now, this is only for very heavy armor and is where you should have your heavy armor if you're not coating it on the front side. You can back it up with alloy too to get some structural stability, but still more of that health. Most people, however, do some spall catchers using just regular metal beam slopes. They're fine for that. Another option, if you want to have a good bit of armor, but you can't really afford that heavy armor, well, you can have a layer of applique as a spall catcher instead. You can also add applique to the surface of your ship to make them detonate on the surface too. But for that application, it's actually better to have the era. Now, the era slopes and the era work the same way. They have exactly the same stats, except that the slopes are half the cost. So it's actually more efficient to only use slopes than the full blocks. They don't provide anything extra. If you want to protect yourself against armor-piercing fragmentation, you can add era backwards on the inside of the hull like this. Under the first surface on the inside, you can add a layer like this, and any shot that's coming in there that's armor-piercing payload or heat or HESH will just not deal a lot of damage. That can be a good addition too, but of course remember, they're destroyed when they're shot at, so they're kind of single use. But worth it sometimes. There are different combinations to piece together, but you usually want to be cost effective. So if you, for example, have double metal or metal backed with stone, you can then add an air gap. An air gap is always good to have, and just back that up with some beam slopes. So say we have this, and if we have the way to do so, we can back this up with some stone, or if we don't, we can back it up with some wood, because wood is a really good health points for that cost. Having an air gap is always advisable though. If you back your metal with wood, you get some weird secondary effects we will talk a little bit about in future videos, but what it boils down to is that you have metal, which is good armor, and then you have the best health point sponge behind it. So you can even have this in several layers. Having checkerboards is not advisable anymore due to explosive damage being trapped in small spaces and dealing more damage. Thus, it's better to work with sheets than checkerboards. If you realize you need to change your ship, click the V menu and go into Armor Refit. A lot of people like to build with alloy and heavy armor. So if we, for example, want to make this lightweight, we will change metal to alloy. And if we want to make it super lightweight, we can actually change stone to wood. And now we have a pretty lightweight design here. So working with a lot of alloy gives us a lot of weight to add to work to. Then, without being too heavy, we can add alloy, have some wood where we save costs, or just have alloy altogether. Like that. Now we have a super light alloy ship. Now we can use heavy armor where we need to use it to provide maximum protection, and back that with some more alloy to keep our weight in check. This is the most popular way to build things in from the depth. However, I would argue it's not the most cost-effective way. To build cost-effectively in terms of armor, you will want to work with a lot of wood, stone, and metal in different configurations, and alloy where you need to. I, for example, love to use alloy as interior armor, because it adds float, low weight, but still decent armor class. If you, however, love to build things as fast as possible, I would definitely try to use as much alloy as possible, and then use heavy armor or metal only where you need to use it. Because then you can get away with the smallest footprints, the least drags, the sleekest shapes, and thus the fastest speed. I believe that will be everything for this little episode here.
From the Depth Instant Tutorial.
This is Eric, and this is your one-stop shop for fuel engines. We covered it before on Instant Tutorials, but we had a weird texture pack, so I think we assume it's outdated. So we're just gonna cover everything a little bit quickly, a little bit more compactly in one video. Everything you need to know. This is a really tiny bad engine producing 109 power. Engines, they basically burn materials, they use materials and make power. As you can see in the lower right corner of the screen, we have the power metric. Now, to be able to use materials, they'll need fuel tanks. The fuel tanks, they're basically converting materials to fuel as we go. So the more engines you have, the more fuel tanks you have. Only having this tank will basically make 100 fuel per minute. Each tank adds 50 fuel extractable per minute, and a vehicle has 50 by default. So if you have a really small engine, like on this craft right now, you don't actually need a fuel tank. You can see it works fine with a material box here. The handy thing about fuel tanks is they will tell you how many materials are extractable as fuel per minute. And under that, you'll see an estimate of how many fuel tanks you are estimated to require. If you have 2 little fuel tanks for your vehicle, you will see the fuel access bar down in the lower right corner go down to 0. One thing that's good to know is that when a fuel tank is destroyed, it will create a fire. If you have a naval vessel, it's a good idea to have your fuel tanks under the waterline, because then the fire will spread much less. So protect your fuel tanks, or at least don't place them inside the AI core so that it will burn down whenever they catch fire. To see the stats of an engine, and to see how it works under full load, we'll need to test it. Here is a big injector engine. What we can do to test the engines is to use engine power. Go to defense and find the signal jammer ECM. You can place it down anywhere. This will use a lot of engine power, so we're gonna drag this up to 20,000 and add another one so we're sure we're using more power than we can produce. The next step is to go to resources and to fuel boxes. Here we can see how many fuel boxes we'll need to add. If you add one, we can see it goes down. We'll need to add more. We are estimated to require about 2,000. You'll just add/remove fuel boxes until your materials extractable per minute as fuel is higher than the estimate requirement. If you run out of materials, just hover over a fuel tank or material box and press Q a couple of times in designer mode. In the lower right corner, you can see we're using all the engine power we produce, which is the goal for this test. Now we can see how many materials per second this thing is burning. We can see how much power it generates also, which is 16,500. If you press Q on the engine, you can go into it and we can see some stats. For example, we can look at stable output, 100%, we can see power per material. This is 430. The higher power per material we have, the more efficient the engine is. So this is a stat you will want to look at when trying to build efficient engines. The fuel generator is the main block of an engine. The arrow indicates in which way we can build the engine. Crankshafts are the pinnacle of the engine. This is where the cylinders can be built around. The cylinders generate the power on the engine. They can be built all around the crankshaft. To generate power, you either need carburetors or injectors. Carburetors can connect on 5 different surfaces, only excluding the top. Injectors can only connect to 2 cylinders. If you have carburetors or injectors on an engine without having any type of cooling, they will overheat. To make them not overheat, you have 2 options, which you can combine. You have pipes, exhaust pipes, or you have radiators, which you can place on cylinders and crankshafts and even connect to each other to provide some type of cooling. Each cylinder will tell if they are overheated. On each cylinder, you can see how much power they generate. This one with a carburetor generates 122. Same with this one. This one without any carburetor or anything will only generate 15. This one with the injector will generate 436. You can see injectors produce a lot more power than carburetors. But carburetor engines can be made to be super efficient. The most power dense engine are injector engines. However, injector engines are really easy to overheat. You can see it's not enough with having 1 exhaust per cylinder when you're having an injector engine. You'll either need to add more than 1 exhaust per cylinder, or you have to have a lot of radiators. Now, radiators are a one-time cost that will cool the engine, but you can need a lot of them if you have no exhausts, and they're pretty expensive. When you have too few fuel boxes, it looks like this. Add more fuel tanks, it even says. Very easy to understand. To make injector engines cheaper but cooler, you'll need to utilize some smart plumbing techniques. Exhausts can namely be combined to one single output. So we have connections all around this little engine, and we can drag it out to this thing. Now each cylinder has at least 2 outputs, and that will make sure the engine doesn't run too hot. To make it run even cooler, you can add radiators in the spaces that are left. In case you need to use your engines to charge a battery, for example, then you go in here and you set battery charge fraction to whatever you want. If you set it to 1, it will only work with charging batteries if batteries can be charged. Under the priority of the engine, you will set priority to 1 for the engines that are most efficient, 0 for the neutral engines, and -1 for the least efficient engines. The engines with priority 1 will be used before the engines of priority -1 or 0. This is an injector engine. It's the least efficient engines of them all. It will be set to -1 so that this engine is only used if it really has to be used. This is useful when you're having several engines. If you're only having one engine on your craft, this doesn't matter. Now we're instead going to move on to a lower power but higher efficiency engine, a carburetor engine. Now the carburetor can be placed under 5 different directions, as said. They can also share superchargers. The superchargers will make this engine more efficient. So here we have a pretty compact design, and we can even add superchargers there and there. But it needs, of course, more cooling. So we'll set up some nice exhaust plumbing. And remember, the more connections you have per cylinder, the more cooling they will provide. If you really can't have exhausts on your build, you can of course spam radiators all over the place. There we have it. Everything is connected together and all the gases can escape in these 2 pipes. As you can see, the power per material is now 465, compared to the injector engine's 400. Now, this is not much better at all, especially considering that the power of this engine is only 1800 and the injector engine is at 3800. This is because the supercharger engines only really are efficient at lower RPMs. So what you can do is to lower the RPM to something around 0.4, 0.3, 0.4 up to 0.5. Around that range is recommended. When we do that, you can see that the power per material has gone up to 820. Under this little stable output chart, you can see the power per material at different RPMs. 25, 50, 100. So, if we want it to be efficient, we'll need to limit the RPM. But it's a big difference. This engine has doubled the efficiency of this engine. So, it will take more space, but having efficient low RPM engines can be a really good long-time investment for slow ships and stationary forts and something that's not in combat and doesn't have to be compact in engine power. For stationary efficient engines, it can be a good idea to add the radiators, because as you can see, they lower the temperature, and lower temperature means higher efficiency for the engines. So all the engines will actually be more efficient having a couple of radiators, but the radiators of course have a high price tag, so use them in moderation. Power per material goes up. If we remove it, power per material goes down. If you're making some pretty exotic engines, there is an adapter, and the adapter can be used if you want to have cylinders on a little bit of extended or moved away configurations like this. Well, but there is another option of course, and that is having several engines. Then you don't need to limit the RPM. Make sure your inefficient engine is set to priority -1 and set the efficient engine to priority +1. Now you just need to make sure that the efficient engine is large enough. Then let's say that our standby cost for this vehicle is 1500. We're just chilling about. That will mean that this engine is producing 1500 power exactly and not anything more. And even though we set the max RPM to 1, you can see this is still running super efficiently because we are not requesting more power. And this is the real beauty with fuel engines. They will only produce as much power as you need, so they can be super efficient since they are so adaptable. And that basically means that this engine, even though it exists, doesn't even take 1 material per second. It's not even used. But then let's say we get into combat and we are suddenly requesting 7000 power because our shields are requesting it and the weapons and all. Well, then this engine will kick in and save the day. So, what engine can we use if we want high RPM and high efficiency at the same time? Well, like in the real world, it's really a waste of materials to throw away exhaust. Yeah, indeed, it can be reused into turbo engines. So we have turbochargers. They can only be attached to carburetors. To make turbo engines, you'll need to use the turbochargers. The turbochargers are one of the most finicky systems in the game. So what you need to do here is, the simplest way is to use the cylinder turbocharger. And this little hairdryer thing connects on the top to the carburetor, and this little base part is connected to the cylinder. And they are in 2 configurations as well and get mirrored automatically. These of course need to be connected up to an exhaust system, preferably a combined output for simplicity. Just like that. Now the exhaust is leaving here and it's connected up to all of the turbochargers. Now in the turbochargers you can see that this engine has a power per material of 644, which is pretty decent. If you look at this one, it's again 400, so it's much more efficient even though we just have these simple ones here. So basically the exhaust from the cylinder is getting funneled into these turbochargers, going back into the carburetor, back and forth in some way and out there. Very handy. However, do keep in mind that if you add exhausts to an engine with this setup and not having them all connected up to turbochargers, you will kind of make the power per material efficiency lower. So don't do that. Now we have the excellent opportunity to look a little bit more at exhausts. Exhausts are really weird, and if you block the exhaust like this, you can see not externally vented cooling reduced to 50%, which is a big hit for engines, so you'll have to make sure they are externally vented. Externally vented can mean some different way. Like for example, if this is the hull, what you can do is you can go to the exhaust and install a hull pipe like this. And now the exhaust is being delivered on top of the hull. The other option is to, at the exterior of your hull, go to air, go to ducts,